such a breakdown in order that order was itself part of the chaos with which it ramified. Stalin said, because all of Stalin's atrocities are ordered and are written down. The Katyn Forest massacre of the Polish officer corps, and there's an interesting quasi-revisionist Polish national film called Katyn, which is available now in certain art cinemas. It's not getting general release, but who in the multiplexes will see it, let's face it. But it is available through art cinema. It's very gruesome at the end, very truthful at the end. Now, the whole Politburo ordered that. All of their signatures are on the death order, including Khrushchev's and the later Thorists and reformers. Stalin's name, bigger than all the others, graphologically, is at the bottom. Stalin. Because they thought they were going to win and the history was on their side, and all the records of the elite of the masses should be there for people to see, for history to judge. We had to wade through feces and blood and filth to create socialism and glory. Because heaven can come down onto the earth, but you've got to wade through the blood in order to get it. You know, heaven's coming down, but first, the abattoir. Onwards. And Orwell, in a sense, understood the logic of many of these processes, whereby purges and trials within regimes, within months, the men like Wyszynski in the 30s at the show trials, screaming at the victims, certain of their subordinates could be on the other side, being screamed at and being executed very quickly. Now, the interesting thing about this novel is that actually it's a man who, apart from in Spain for a few brief months before he got out, never really experienced the rigours of communism. There will be many leftists who say it's a fantasy, it's an artist's metaphorisation of what occurred in certain Eastern European societies, particularly certain societies that were less controlled by Soviet power, Hodges Albania, parts of Yugoslavia, and Ceausescu's Romania, where there were indigenous communist terrorist army-based and paramilitary movements came to power without necessarily the intervention of the Red Army. Sometimes you see purer forms of communism built to excess of a sort that occupied Eastern Europe didn't always equate to, because there were certain balancing elements in occupied Eastern Europe. In the Soviet Union, of course, Soviet power and pure communism had been completely uncontrolled. This is from the very beginning. The term Bolshevik revolution is itself a misnomer. There was no revolution. It was a coup by the armed wing of the Bolshevik party, and was thought of at the time by the people who did it. There was a moment when Trotsky, Lenin and Stalin slept together in a room about as big as this after they'd seized Kerensky's palace, and with newspaper on the ground. It was the first day after about being up for over 20 hours. And after they'd had a couple of hours sleep, Lenin got up and said, "Comrades, we've achieved a great thing. We've been in power for one day." Because power is what it's all about in relation to this ideology, which ramifies with what O'Brien says to Winston at the end. When Winston's, the point is that Winston has intellectually denied the sovereignty of the party's rule over the mind. Therefore, he's far more important than some troll who just rebels physically against the party, but then you break their arms or their legs or send them to a camp. That's of no importance. What matters is the mind that controls the body. So before they kill Winston, they will torture him into submission. He must love Big Brother before they execute him. He must be reworked. There's a famous moment, isn't there, when all his teeth are rotten. And O'Brien pulls all the teeth out, snap, in one go, and pulls them out of the mouth. And he says, "Look what you've done to yourself. Look how you've destroyed yourself." And Winston, John Hurt's always playing the victim, isn't he? And Hurt says, "You've done it to me, you've done it to me." And O'Brien says, No. You've done it to yourself by denying the love of the party. Do you remember that line? "You're just a cell, Winston," he says. "You're a cell." The individual has long ceased to exist in history as we define it. You are just an individual soul within the body of the party. Your death, your life is of no significance. You're just a cell. Do you die when you cut your fingernails? I say this in this theatrical manner because I played O'Brien. When I was 18, we had a school play. And it was quite interesting. There was a very bad actor called, who I won't name, whose surname was Smith, who played Winston Smith. And I played O'Brien, dressed all in black. And we didn't have any girls in the school. So we had the one homosexual in the sixth form dressed up as a girl who played Julia. And there's this strange moment, because this is an all-boys school, and all the Catholic brothers are down there. It's all very odd, isn't it? I'm one of the few Protestants there. There's a transvestite on the stage and a bloke who can't act. And we're playing 1984. It's typical. And when Julia comes on, there's this great wolf whistle that then dies in its own throat. You know what I mean? When they all realise, good Lord, it's so-and-so dressed up. And there's a moment of horror and terror, which is all these grammar school boys, you know, all that sort of thing, you know? And it's quite funny, actually. But Brian is one hell of a part. I mean, it really is, let's face it. Because he's attracted to her, Brian. From the earliest stages, because Brian is a priest who believes in nothing but the ideology of the party and who is genuine. He's not a fraud. He wrote the theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism. He believes in torturing Winston as a cog in the machine because it doesn't matter. You see, it's the futility of the absence of negation. They could just shoot Winston and have done with it. Why go through all these games? But the games are important because they prove the meaning of meaninglessness, if you like. That's the point. Because all of these ideologies are totally atheistic, totally anti-transcendental, totally mechanistic, and totally material. It's the sort of revenge of matter upon itself, if you like. It's the churning of matter. And he's the sort of the scientific non-priest of the churning of matter, human matter. There was a slogan of the Czechoslovak secret police where they used to say, "We are the engineers of human souls." And there's a famous Czech dissident novel called that, or uses it in the title. And that's how they really saw themselves. They saw themselves as a vanguard in history. The working class had been oppressed, had been degraded, had been decanted from the agricultural state, this is in classical Marxist theory, into the industrial one. The industrial civilization creates its negation through social renewal and the creation of a vanguard which is drawn from all classes, particularly from bohemian, outsider intellectuals, half of whom are Jews, although they don't say that in the ideology, half of whom are Gentiles who want to destroy their own society because they hate it for various reasons and want to tear it down and want to see themselves, largely marginal figures hitherto, promoted to serious posts. This is why ideology is so important for these sorts of regimes, because it's committees and groups of quasi-intellectuals fighting with each other about meaning and purpose and plotting against each other and doing each other down and sort of releasing statements to the secret police so he'll be purged, so I can get his job, so I can edit this magazine, so I can overstep him and so on. It's a sort of the universalization with a ruthless and very violent terrorism added on of the struggles that go on in your average university department today. But that sort of engine of destruction isn't added on. Orwell's extraordinary insight is his ability to see these processes at work. Many people, and don't forget, communism is one of the most extraordinary stories of modern man. Here is a movement that emerges with almost no social support at all and a few fringe ideologues around it in the middle of the 19th century. By the first third of the following century, just past, it controls vast stretches of the world. It kills tens of millions of human beings. It launches enormous wars. It creates enormous social structures. And then it fails virtually and deconstructs morally and structurally of itself. Almost as if it no longer believes in its own lies anymore. It's quite clear that Gorbachev in many ways was a liberal or a social democrat in an old stroke new way, who allowed it to go. Because no reform of that system is possible unless you were to use violent and ferocious force, which Honecker wanted to do when the crowds began to come out in Germany prior to the deconstruction of the wall. Honecker's first instinct is to start on the streets, fire again, step on the bodies of those that are covered in blood and fire on them and step on their bodies. Socialism, imposed on the masses. Because we are the masters of fate and history. And it's only because Gorbachev said the Red Army will not back the Stasi up in the streets that in a sense Honecker remembered he was feeling a bit ill and they had a bit of cancer on the way, and so they allowed him to clear off to Chile. And slightly more reformist Euro-communist types took over, and eventually sections of the wall were opened. Remember those incredibly dramatic moments when the bulldozers and so on brought down sections of the wall and the Stasi and the Kappas came out and stood with their Kalashnikovs and the Germans came through the gaps that had been created and the Westerners were on the other side cheering and this sort of thing. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a British trade unionist leader who'd been called Ken Gill. He was leader of TAS, a certain section of the electrical engineering union. And he said that when the Soviet Union